it's kind of matured. You know, the original digital computers were invented back during World War II. The British bomb that was developed to crack the German Enigma code machine. And I doubt Alan Turing foresaw that one day little kids would be, killing virtual Nazis with the evolution of that same technology. And of course, the internet, as we know it today, DARPA really kind of planned that as a way for researchers to share ideas and stuff at the academic level. And instead, it's kind of evolved into the best place to find rare Pokemon cards and download internet porn. So every one of these things, by its very nature, is going to go through very unpredictable, chaotic evolutions. And games are no different. In some sense, each one of these formats started as a form of very specific problem solving. Over time, they broadened out into mass entertainment, where they were basically accessible to larger and larger groups of people and used for broader and broader kind of areas of communication. And then it was only later, once they had hit that mass market, that they then started aspiring towards artistic expression. And so I think games are kind of down at the bottom side of that, hitting the mass market, originally starting up at the specific problem solving. And now they're starting to aspire back up. What can we do that's really interesting, socially meaningful, and relevant with this format? So this conference is really about learning, and that's kind of some of what I want to talk about today. And when I think of learning, one thing I definitely do not think about is education. I think education, in some sense in my mind, is very disconnected from the idea of learning, and that's part of the problem that we're kind of facing. Learning is a very kind of broad activity. Not just humans engage in it. It's a fundamental kind of survival thing that a lot of organisms face. In some sense, we're limited. We're these separate organisms kind of out there relating to the world. We have this bubble around us, this experiential bubble. Now, information comes from the world in through our senses. We process that in our brains, and then we basically have some output. What can we do to influence the situation? Now, that's kind of really what learning is about, improving this loop here, how we relate to the world. In some sense, when we bring this information into our heads, we start building models in our imagination. And this is something that humans fundamentally do to the point where we don't even realize we're doing it. We do it so effectively. In our imagination, we run different scenarios. Should I do A, B, or C? And we do this almost instantaneously before we decide what to do, what our course of action is. Now, there are a lot of different aspects, kind of subcategories to our model building, our imagination. Things that we kind of do, again, fairly subconsciously. Classification, managing and simulating chains of causality, what's causing what. Empathy, being able to read others, what they're thinking. And agency, what effects can I have on the world? What is, the verbs that I have to influence the situation around me? In some sense, if you imagine you're in a forest, you turn around the corner and you see this. Instantly, in your head, you're going to classify, what is this thing? You're going to empathize, is it alive? Is it dead? Does it notice me? Does it look hungry? What is the likely chain of events from this point on? Probably bad. What can I do to influence the situation? Probably maybe run. I don't know. So this all happens almost instantaneously in your imagination as you run this model upon encountering a tiger. Now, if you were walking through that very same forest, and instead you encountered this, which looks very similar, actually, you probably go down a totally different choice, all the way back in classification. Now you're looking at a picture of a tiger, not a tiger. Of course, this point's been made before many times, but it's kind of important to recognize the fact that this is such a subconscious process to us that we almost take it for granted. Now, more primitive animals, don't have as many layers of this as we do. If you're a fish living out in the ocean, really, it's more a matter of classification. Do I eat this thing or is it going to eat me? That's about it. Almost all of my behavior is kind of based upon that. As we evolve higher and higher levels of intelligence, and the people around us, the creatures around us, were at higher levels of behavior, we started developing deeper abilities to do things like empathize with those around us, kind of manage and predict chains of causal reactions. And, basically what our alternatives are in these situations. In some sense, people think that our intelligence was wrapped by the fact that the people living around us became more intelligent, hence harder to predict. Hence, we had to have a better, stronger brain to predict these elaborate animals around us, which were really our peers, other humans. Now, it's kind of amazing that you can take any, 5-year-old, and they can very quickly tell you the difference between a dog and a cat. They can classify that, and really, it's very subtle differences. But even at a young age, we learn to make this classification, very seamlessly. The way we can empathize with other people is almost psychic, in some sense, the way you can look at somebody else and kind of read how they're feeling, what they're likely to do. In some sense, you can kind of imagine, we're building a model of people around us. When we interact with them, we're actually modeling what they're thinking all the time, even in conversation. And of course, they're modeling us as well. And we have a model in our heads of their model of us. If you think about the way you act around your coworkers, maybe versus the way you act around your family, you understand that your coworkers have a certain model of you in their head, and they've seen, you do certain things, and they have certain expectations of you. Your family might have slightly different expectations, and you tend to act to be kind of more in concert with their expectations, because you are actually running a model of their model of you in your head and trying to be consistent with it. And so this kind of nested modeling is really kind of fascinating to me, how seamlessly and effortlessly we kind of accomplish it. The human sensory apparatus brings in hundreds of millions of bits of information per second, relative to our conscious data stream, which is very, very low, actually. Most of our intelligence, in some sense, is kind of pre-conscious. This pre-conscious intelligence is deciding which of these 100 million bits of information is relevant to us at any given second, and letting those enter our stream of consciousness. So really, a lot of our intelligence we're not even aware of. It's happening at this kind of subconscious level. Now, back to the experience bubble that we all find ourselves living in. We're basically learning from the experience that we have out in the world. Now, we have a very limited experience. During your entire lifetime, you're only going to experience so many things. And so we've actually tried to find ways to enhance our learning based upon, bringing in more experience than we can personally have. Some of that is by having toy experiences, that maybe are in situations that would be life-threatening, where we don't actually want to go out and have the experience. Other times, we're actually stealing experience from others. Other people can come up and give us their experiences, and we can learn from that as though we had those experiences. These are both kind of fundamentally forms of education. We now call basically the toy experiences play. The fact that I can sit there and play and have experiences in a simulated kind of little environment. Learning from others, we've come to call story. Really, that's what storytelling is all about. Both of these are fundamentally educational technologies that evolution has discovered and that we have kind of developed further. Story and play have actually a very interesting relationship kind of in my mind. We think of stories as being this emotionally rich thing that games very often are accused of not having a very rich emotional palette. And I don't think that's true. I think, in fact, games do have a very rich emotional palette. It's just a different palette. There's things I've experienced in games that I've never experienced sitting back and watching a movie. Things like pride over what I've done or accomplishment, or even guilt. The first time I played Black and White, which is this game where you basically get this little creature and you can punish it or reward it, and you're training it over time. I just, for the hell of it, wanted to beat up my creature to see what would happen, and so I kind of just slapped him around, and he was all black and blue and whimpering, and I really felt bad, and I've never felt guilty, watching a show, no matter what happened on screen, because they did it. It wasn't me. So the fact that a game, you have the agency, you're the one causing the action, can access different emotions and a different emotional palette than storytelling can right off the bat. And I think game designers kind of have to learn to make use of the palette that we have ready access to. Story and play have another interesting relationship in my mind. Some of the very best stories for me have been ones that are inherently deconstructive. I can take them apart, like Star Wars, for instance. They've got lightsabers, they have the Death Star, they have the Force, these interesting characters. And in my mind, I can kind of play with those parts. I can sit there and wonder, what would happen if you put an Imperial, battle star or Death Star against, a Cylon base star versus the Borg cube. And in fact, I found an entire internet debate about exactly this.